Thanks. Well, thanks. We're doing a filler here, Steve and I, because we were short 3 people, and I think 2 dropped out. But this is just kind of a fun session. We're just going to go through some pictures, and this is an audience participation session because you guys are going to point out what's wrong with the picture. First one. What's wrong with this picture? Yeah, well, how are you going to get a sample out of that tap? They got it pointed up, and it's threaded. They may have a hose bib vacuum breaker on it, but it's really not going to do too much good. But that was actually the, most of these pictures are mine, but that picture was, that was the actual sample tap for the combined tap. So that was a incorrect location. Now, what's wrong with this one? This one is a little more, difficult or hard to tell. It's not real bad, but they got the gauge hidden behind there, and then one of these pressure switches in electrical is in a very bad location because that electrical is made for if there was going to be a chlorination, emergency chlorination, you have to have the outlet that energizes just with the pump. So it's in with the pressure switch there.
Also looks like there's been a leak or 2 on that system with all that staining.
Doesn't, I don't think so, but.
With all that iron stain, it looks like all kinds of iron stain on it.
Yeah, it might just be the lighting.
Okay.
This one's Captain Obvious. It's not a well, but this is a service connection. And I don't know how long it was flooding, but that was just leaking, and then it's just causing other issues if you're flooding homes next to it and all around. And this, so this is a riser for the water connection to the site. Right, and is that, so I think that was their reason or that was their ventilation. And instead of, because the cap, you can notice the cap looks kind of old. It didn't have any proper, so they had a hole there. And so that one had to be switched out for a proper cap. This one's kind of hard to tell, but there's actually, there was a bunch of trash thrown in there, and that was actually a well. And they put a barrel around it. So, and they had a top on it. It's like, okay, where's the well? Oh, someone put some trash in here also. I've seen all sorts of fun stuff. Someone likes wire nuts. And who knows what else is coming out of that outlet, but that junction box should not have that many wires coming out of it. So yeah, so I think that one we definitely had to tell them to clean that up and remake the electrical outlet so it's working. Doesn't create a hazard. Anything wrong with that one? No, that's not it, even though that's a good point. It's not gray. Yep, there's a bolt missing there. And then when I touched the other ones, yeah, those ones were kind of loose. So the cap could be removed and could do whatever in that one. But it's properly protected. This one's kind of hard to figure out too. There's the pressure switch. There's a pipe. There's the tanks. It's like, well, yeah, and Yeah, that's a pressure switch cap. They're both on there. That was just one that was tossed out when they replaced the last pressure switch. No, it's actually, this one is hard to find also because it's like, where's the, yeah, this is a well house that had a well inside there and it was hidden from view behind this stuff. Because here's the pressure switches and it's going this way, and it was crammed in with a bunch of other debris, so it wasn't able to function right, and it didn't have a rate cap on it. You guys recognize this type?
Old style buried tank right on the wall, pitless, right on the pitless, built right in pitless.
Right, yeah, and what's wrong with these? And there's still some around, but what happens to these? They're the buried tank underneath. This is going to the tank, so here's the gauge that's going down to the tank. Those are in the ground long enough, and you know, depending on the soils, if it's an aggressive soil type, then that's going to corrode and create some issues. I did have some old pictures of a whitewater tank we pulled out and actually cut in half. But those ones I could not find. They were old ones. Yeah, it's conduit's a little ajar, so anytime you have any type of an opening, it's just a reason for bugs to go in there and put webs or crawl down there and die. Yep, the conduit, I mean, that's something that I'm not going to make anyone replace if it's not the gray electrical. If there was some work on the well, which they had to do here, then they replaced it. But, I mean, there's a lot of old wells with the steel conduit.
And it's more about the color designating it as electrical rather than the
Right.
quality of the pipe. Because
Right.
you can have the galvanized for the metal pipe, which is approved conduit. You can have the gray, Schedule 80 drop pipe is strong.
It's strong. Yep. It just depends on, yeah.
So would you extend the thought process, you would make them replace it unless they, or change it unless they replace something? If they're using, I've seen them use black water line.
Yeah, and that stuff is probably, you know, at least 160 PSI. I've seen that too, but if it's not intact, I'll just make them change it properly. Because if it's cracked on top like it was here, then that conduit was cracked, so we just had them replace it. It's only if there's an issue, then I'll make them change it. There's another one. This is probably the most common, you know, there's avenues into the electrical, and they just needed to put the plate on there. But that's a pretty big opening. A lot of, yeah. And that's I think on the other side of this one, it had the downturned, drilled in vent with a screen. But it doesn't help if it's like this. This one is kind of hard to know unless you do. This is a pipe coming out of a well house. And what are usually, you know what these pipes are usually for?
Or even softener discharge.
No, this is, it's actually a blow off for the pump to waste. So you can bypass the water going into the system, and then you turn a valve so it's isolated from the system. And if a well's down, then you can blow out the water from this end. But we usually have them either shorten this up or put a screen on it and prop it up. But there's a, you know, a lot of animals, if it's not used in a long, long time, animals will go in there and, you know, set up shop. But there's not usually an issue with this ever unless there's a backflow and the valve is slightly open. So it's just that we usually ask them to put a screen on the end of that. Yeah, the well's not anywhere near here, but if you have any sort of VOCs, gas, paint, if they're taking a sample for VOCs, then you're going to get a hit, because that's the volatile organic chemicals in the air are definitely going to create a hit for that. So we don't let them store any open containers like gas and oil. And I just 2 weeks ago I was in a well house, and they had used oil sitting in there, and it was so strong. It's like, what are you doing? If they get a hit, it's definitely gonna cost them some money. They'll have to do it again. Oop, or missed one. This is just a leaking pump to waste. This is one of the pump to waste that you saw the other picture. It has a screen on it, and it's but it's not, it's leaking. So if there that much stuff is in there, then if there is any type of a backflow, then you might get some problems with sampling. This is a riser for a home, and what do we got here? Yes, it's insulation. Because they have to insulate their riser pipes for winter. But this one was open, and there's usually a home connected to this, but this was an open site, and then you have people connecting their garden hoses here or extra water for their home. And this one also, I think, went to a campsite. They were.
That's from potable water?
Yeah, it's potable water. Yeah, but they didn't have. You see, it's just you're not supposed to have extra connections on there. So these ones were removed. Yeah, this right here is that is a heat rod to keep that warm. But they didn't put that on until the warm weather was around. Okay, yeah. What's that? Anyone got any guesses on this one? Well, if you haven't, this one is actually, this pipe is for a discharge, and this is a backwash. If it was a salt softener or a iron treatment system, and then they were also discharging directly from here, and there's also no air gap there. Well protected. Yeah. You think the garbage is a little too close? Yeah. The cap looks good. Pipe, everything well protected, but they have their garbage bin. They moved their garbage bin over right next to it. This is a hard one. Everything looks okay. Any guesses?
Paint's not NSF approved?
You got it. These ones are not NSF approved. Yeah. This is at another mobile home park right near the well house. And they're storing all sorts of stuff out there. And lawnmower with gas, and old wells like this, you don't know if they're grouted properly or not. So if anything leaks, go down in the annular space, they can get a false hit for VOCs, or actually not false, but they can get a hit for VOCs. Oil leaking, it's way too close to the well. This is a blow off, and this is the riser pipe to access the valve to turn on the blow off. So, and there's another valve here, and that one is a valve to isolate areas or directionally flush the system. It's just that it's so overgrown, the access is pretty hard. So we usually have them clear out the area and just make sure that they have access to it.
It doesn't have to be protected?
It is protected. Oh, just with the cap, they got caps on them. I mean, it's good. They got caps on everything. It's just not very accessible. So it's like, ask them, well, how long, when's the last time you used this one? It's been some years. So that's when I make them submit a new plan for flushing and ask how they're using it. And then sometimes if they're so old, those valves, might be seized up from non-use because they're supposed to turn them at least once a year.
It's connected to, sample tabs connected to something.
There's a tap there. What speaks right away? What looks bad? What looks bad? Pressure tanks, yep. And this is a valve. And because they treat here with chlorine, so of course chlorine is going to attack the metal, and there wasn't proper ventilation for years, and if they tried to turn this valve in an emergency, it's probably not going to work or break off. So it took me years for them to fix this, and these are gone now. But it was part of my write-ups and enforcement.
Did they replace them with fiberglass tanks for that reason?
They did put in a bank of bladder tanks. Yep. Okay, this one is really hard to figure out because everything looks great there. Well, I won't.
Is that a bolt where your vent should be on the top?
This?
Oh, no, that's an approved one, okay.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah, this is just a regular outside hose bib on a mobile home. The problem was with this was a tap that we got positives out of over and over again. And so when you're doing the type 1s, if there's a lot of or homes in a row, we have to collect follow-up samples after a bad sample, upstream within 5 service connections and downstream within 5 service connections. We were getting good samples on each side over and over again. This was positive. So I said, okay, well, let's take it apart. And that's what was inside of it, some larvae. So just that tap, because you can't access homes sometimes to get indoor samples, and it's not like you want to go inside to some of these places that have their kitchen faucet, and you got to move the dishes out of the way to take a sample there. But so there's a lot of operators that will take samples on the exterior and connect something to even though it's threaded, they'll connect something here that's chlorinated and clean, or that is clean, it's clean, and still take sample from the outside tap because you don't have a choice. And that was the designated sample tap. So there were some bugs in there, and it was funny because after that happened, it was, I think, the next month, something like that happened again. We did the same thing and found the exact same thing. It's like, how can that happen, like twice in a couple months?
How were they not getting flushed out, or where were they at?
They were in the atmospheric vacuum breaker.
Oh, they were up in the back.
Yeah, yep. So that's what we took off and took apart.
All right.
And they grew in there. This is a flushing hydrant, and it's not turned on. Pretty bad leak. That's kind of obvious, but also This is the pipe coming up, and if you have flushing hydrants in communities, they have to be 75% the size of the mains. So if the main down there is 3 inches, 4 inches, then you're going to have a 3-inch pipe. So this was an inadequate flushing hydrant. Okay, and on type 2 systems, do you know what's wrong with something like this? It was actually plugged. Meters, if you have to service the meter, what happens? Right, system's going to depressurize, and you have to take this whole thing out. So whenever there's work done in the well house, I'll make them put a meter bypass in, so you're not interrupting service, and then you have to go through all the sampling. What's wrong with this picture?
Is it mud in your, is it a valve box?
Yeah, we had to dig down to get that, but I'm talking about this guy's pants. Those are bad. That's like 60s, 70s stuff. But this was also a flushing hydrant that we had them dig up, and I made him extend it out because it gets filled up, and it's not accessible. And if it's underground like that, you have a chance of dirt and debris and whatever getting in, and that's a lot easier to have a contaminated water system if it's buried like this. I mean, it's a valve box, and there's the valve that turns on the blow off, but if it's buried under dirt and not accessible, it is not acceptable. So we had them change that. Yeah.
And I think for the type 1 supplies, if I'm not familiar about these laws, are they required just for a routine flushing program like in the city water system?
Yes. Yep. Just like the flushing hydrants, but these are called blow-offs because they're usually only 1.5 to 2 inches to 4 inches large. So depending on the size of the main. Right. That hose was coming, just a sump pump in the well house. So that hose was coming from there. And that's directly connected to the water system. Yeah, the purple house is pretty bad, isn't it? That's wrong. Paint sale. This one, I made them put in some protection. People can drive up. I could have just drove up and smashed that right over. But luckily, yeah, and it was just a steel pipe and just rusting from the weather. There wasn't anything wrong, but in these communities, I don't trust anyone not to crunch the well because it's happened so many times. There's actually, does anyone from Montcalm County? Do you recognize this? It's a type 2. This is it's at the campground, and there's nothing wrong with this, but this is one of the oldest working wells. It's actually a wrought iron casing below here. I think it was 1909 or 1911, and it's still functioning just fine. They just upgraded from the connection below grade to and put a newer cap and electrical on there. But
What campground was it?
Gosh, what was it?
Southeast of town.
You know what? I can't think of it right now. I should have put the name up here. But
Anita used to handle all those.
what's that?
Anita used to handle all those.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting when I knew about that. Another one that is definitely the most common because how does this happen? Most likely. Yeah, these guys are mowing the lawns in the public areas and near the wellheads and then they crunch them. That's got to be my most common deficiency. What's wrong with that? Not. There's nothing wrong with the dog poop. It's just they haven't accessed this. It's those are another. It's another not using their valves and their flushing. And once we got into that, you know, we found out the valve seized up, not being used, and it was at a time when there was a positive, and we're checking out the system and trying to figure out where to isolate the system because you want to be able to isolate an area. You don't want to have to turn off if it's a 300 site community. You don't want to have to turn off the whole system for one street. So we try and make sure the isolation valves and the blow off are accessible. But yeah, the dog poop was pretty fresh. It's like, if you had your dog, you would think you'd at least brush it off there. But, yeah. They fixed it, just not properly. You don't see many of those caps. That's different. This one was, it's not a very good sample tap. This was out in distribution under the skirting of a mobile home park, and we had some positives. So when they submitted their samples, I said, okay, well, where'd you take the samples? Because they didn't have a good upstream, downstream. And this supposedly was one of the upstream samples that he took a sample from. So I wanted to see it. So pulled off the skirting, looked at it, and it's like, that has never been used in the last 3 days. So he just lied. And I, said, okay, show me how you sample. He goes to sample that, and he has a cup of bleach, and he's putting the bleach cup over the end of the, oh yeah, right, okay, let's see it turn that valve too. Well, I said, forget it, we'll pick another house and fix that valve if you're ever gonna sample out of there again. So he just, flat out lied. There's no way he sampled from that tap. All right, this is a campground mobile home park, and this is a home, and there's a well right there. That well went bad, so they connected a garden hose to the home from that riser. So that's, and then there's their flushing hydrant, which is not the right, unapproved yard hydrant there. So they had to change all that up. What's wrong with that? I was just constipated for a couple days after that. Yeah, that's not quite 12 inches above grade, is it? Had to brush off the leaves to find it. I knew there was a well around here. There a year ago, and it wasn't. I asked them to fix it before, but there was more sand and dirt that piled up, and it's like had to find that thing. So I had to make them extend that casing. And there it is, right there. And it's right off a trail where a bunch of kids ride, so they really didn't want to, lift that casing up.
So what do? You can have people put manhole cover, because I've been working
Yeah,
Mary's wellhead, because he put it over the barn, why did he put it over the barn, no clue, but I was just wondering, I know there's like.
that's actually what we did here. He put a wooden frame, big rectangular frame around that, dug down so it was open, so the vent could breathe. If it wasn't this scenario, I probably would have had him pull the casing up, but you don't want kids running into that and hurting themselves. 'Cause this was a bike path for all the kids in the community. The other wall's fine. So, well, we're going to be able to get on that. Yeah. They had to take the tree down.
What came first, the well or the tree?
Yeah, you can tell that's an old well with a newer cap. That's about it. But yeah, it's like I can't believe they let that tree grow and grow and grow, and you know those roots are going to be pushing on the casing, and something's going to crack or open down there at the pitless. So, and there was a problem. So you know, it was another reason I was there, and so they had to take the tree down. Little- Yeah, a little bit of annular space there. So where's the grout? It's way down there. So no, I think this was actually neat cement, but it's settled way down. So and I don't know. I can't remember where this was, but they just had to regrout. Okay. This one's pretty hard to see too. Yeah, there's a well right there in cement. That's grout. Yeah, they didn't cut it off and cap it. They were supposed to cut it off below grade and grout it. They just put it right down there after they pulled the pump. Yeah. Yep, there's a flowing well discharge going into the ground. So there's no gap or anything. And if it's a partial flowing well, then that could cause problems. Why are there always electrical issues? Yeah, it's always fun to see these, and it's like, what were you thinking? There's another. Yeah, I like that sample tap. That's another tough one. Yeah, they didn't bother to put the cap back on. And it's, it could be raining and, whatever goes in there. That's a little low to the ground, isn't it? They got a nice atmospheric vacuum breaker there. Doesn't do any good when, you're sitting below the rim. I had to dig this one out too. And look at the cap. Got crunched by a car, so I had to dig out the snow. It was over, this much snow. They were pushing the snow on, with the plow truck over the wellhead. That's a little different. Innovative. This well is under the deck. A new deck. Oh, what happened? Nope, there was another one in there. Let me see. Oh, gosh. There was. I guess not. There was a few more. Must have been on the old one. Okay. That's about it. Just a fun little, hide and seek and looking at some fun pictures. I have a ton more. I just didn't have time to put them on there. and some of them are interesting, but some case studies too. I'll put together, I got some good case studies that just happened this past year, and I'll have to do that. I had one that was on a boil water notice from November 2020 to December 2021.